Yeah, and people got to realize under British chattel slavery,
Hmm.
your property,
Mm.
you have no rights.
Yeah.
A slave owner can do whatever he wants to with it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Stories of 1812 podcast. This is a series wherein we look at the characters, their challenges, their achievements, people who lived during the War of 1812 period. And today we have a special guest who's come all the way from, well, it used to be Orangeville.
Right,
I don't think it's Orangeville anymore. His name is Peter Meyler.
Myler.
Meyler.
Yeah,
I've been calling you Mailer all along. That's bad. And Peter is, I guess you did have a day job,
that's
but
right.
you're retired now. But your primary activity has been as a historian, as a local historian.
Right.
Yeah. And in particular, and who we're going to talk about today, is Richard Pierpoint. And he has a very interesting personal story that we're going to get into in just one second. Um, you have also written, I think, not only on Richard Pierpoint, but on other individuals, and we're going to cover that off as well. Now, Richard Pierpoint was a black loyalist settler. He was a former slave who was taken from his home in Senegal, and he fought on the side of the British. I'm skipping over a lot of details,
Sure.
but just to get you going, fought on the side of the British in the American Revolutionary period, and then came to Canada. So I guess that's where we should start, right? Born in Senegal.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was born in Senegal about 1744,
Mhm.
captured when he was about 16 years old, and then we think transported directly to likely New England at that time. So, but the first record we have of a black man known as Richard Pierpoint
Mhm.
ends up in a newspaper ad in Pennsylvania in
Mhm.
1779.
Mhm.
And it says that he and another man had been captured on October 23rd, 19 or 1778.
But we know that he's from Senegal, and we'll get to that later because he petitioned the British government in 1821.
That's right.
So that part we know. And the name Richard Pierpoint likely came from the
Well,
officer he,
well,
yeah.
there's no record of where the name came from.
Hmm.
Richard was a pretty common name that they would give to an enslaved person, usually shortened to Dick, because later on he was known as Captain Dick.
Hmm.
And Pierpoint, again, it's an unusual name, like it's not that common. And that's why we figure he was in New England, because most of the Pierpoints or Pierponts
Hmm.
were in New England. But again, he could have taken the name from anywhere because there was a second ad for him in Pennsylvania
Hmm.
where it said Richard Lincoln, formerly advertised as Pierpoint. So the jailer who had him in jail in Pennsylvania, was um, curious about what his last name actually might be. He might have been using Pierpoint to make sure that people who were trying to find him didn't find him.
So we can't really 100% attribute to those Pennsylvania newspaper articles to him. We know
That's
the
right.
name is there, but to him. So during that period, though, somewhere in that period between 1760 and 1770, I guess, 5, the beginning of the American
That's right.
Revolution, he was a personal servant to a British officer, but we don't know for how long
No,
and we don't know where.
no, because it would
Yeah.
have been the time of the 7 Years' War, and in North America, the French and Indian War. Now, in 1759, the French and Indian War, that was the time that the British took over French Canada,
Hmm.
and it became a British colony as well. So when the war, so basically the war had ended for the Americans by that time, 1760.
Hmm.
So he was probably just kept as a personal servant, usually as a laborer on a farm or a property, taking care of animals and doing husbandry work
Hmm.
and things like that.
But where the story does pick up, and we do know this, that he had an opportunity to gain his freedom and fought in Butler's Rangers. Now,
Right.
Butler's Rangers was a force that was organized by the British. It did many things, like including raids
Oh yeah.
in the American colonies at the time, but they offered black folks, black people, the opportunity to gain their freedom if they fought with them. And so he joined Butler's Rangers in about 1776, something like that.
No, it would have been after his jailing
Oh, okay.
because he was still in jail. He was in jail in Sunbury probably for about two
But we
years.
don't, sorry, just point of
Yeah,
correction. We don't know for sure that that was him in jail.
that's right.
Yeah, and I don't kind of want to stay there. I
That's
want
right.
to move to Butler's
Yeah,
Rangers. So
so
let's pick up the
yeah,
story.
so what happened with
Yeah,
Butler's Rangers?
yeah.
They were very active in that part of Pennsylvania during the Revolution. They
Hmm.
were based at Fort Niagara, but they would travel as far as New Jersey
Hmm.
on their raids. They were considered a guerrilla war outfit. And after the British, and part of their normal thing when they were going, and they would travel through the woods, with um, villages that they were loyalists, still settlements,
Hmm.
and stay with indigenous people because two of their companies where you had all the members of those two companies had to speak indigenous languages,
Hmm.
but they would recruit as long all the way along as well in
Wow.
addition. So that's why in 1780, I think it's the first official record of the Richard Pierpoint we know who ended up in Niagara. It's
Right.
because he's on a muster roll. And what's interesting on that,
So just for
yeah,
folks, so what is called Old Fort Niagara
right,
is north of Lewiston. I think the official name is Youngstown, and it's across the river from here. And Butler's Rangers was based there, but
that's
as you
right,
say, did a lot. So we know he was a member of Butler's
that's right,
Rangers.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was listed as a pioneer in Butler's Rangers, which is
Hmm.
unusual because pioneers would usually in the regular units would be the ones who build the bridges and clear roads for the soldiers. But of course, Butler's Rangers didn't need that. So someone I talked to at one time about Butler's Rangers and what that role would be.
Hmm.
Basically, that would be the person who would go in front of Butler's Rangers with axe, a hatchet, or and to break down the doors of the whatever
Hmm.
building they were attacking. So again, a
And
very
he would have been one of those
yeah,
guys.
very dangerous
Wow.
role because you're
Yeah.
up front going, yeah,
Well, as the story continues, we know that the American Revolutionary War ended in
right,
1783 with the Treaty of Paris, and a lot of what are called loyalists,
right,
including Richard Pierpoint and including other black loyalists, would have found themselves at Fort Niagara.
right,
And gradually, they migrated across the river, and I think that's where Niagara on the Lake started.
right.
Now, he got a land grant. Maybe you could pick up the story
Sure.
from there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, once a treaty and everyone had to come on the other side of the river, Niagara River.
yeah.
In 1791, the government finally gave land grants to loyalists, including Pierpoint. And so he got two 100-acre lots in what it was Grantham Township,
Hmm.
what is
Which is
now,
modern day St.
yeah,
Catharines.
right in the
Right.
middle of modern day St.
Yeah, that's
Catharines.
right.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting. So he was one of only about 10 black people on the United Empire Loyalist rolls,
List. Yeah,
and
yeah.
you could only get a land grant as a black man.
Hmm.
Of course, women didn't get grants.
Hmm.
If you fought as a free person with the British during the war. So he settled there, and it's interesting. He had some standing in the community, obviously, because there's a creek there, and it actually
Well,
became
there's a plaque there today, isn't
yeah, the
there? Yeah,
plaque is there,
right.
and part of the creek still exists. It's called Dick's Creek.
Hmm.
So for a land feature to be named after a black person
Hmm.
at that time, he had some sort of role or some sort of command or some sort of status in the community.
Now, in 1794, he petitioned the British government. I think it was John Simcoe at that
Right,
time, because he wanted land grants that were, he and other blacks wanted land grants that were contiguous so that they could help each other and have a community.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was 14 men got together. And if anyone's been involved in committees and getting people together and trying to decide on one particular message, you know there had to be meetings going on with these 14 men. And when you read the petition, you can see the um, the problems they were trying to solve with the petition. One is, yeah, they wanted land together so they
Mhm.
could farm together and help each other out. And it also said that it would prove that they were industrious and loyal.
Mm.
So obviously, the general impression you get then that from people in the community then at that time that the blacks were not industrious and were not loyal. And of course, Richard Pierpoint, you couldn't find anyone more loyal or
Well, we'll pick
industrious.
up the story
Yeah,
because he lived to a ripe old age
yeah,
and worked as a farmer and a land clearer to his ripe old age.
that's right.
But that petition was unfortunately dismissed,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
we don't
Yeah.
know why we don't know
Yeah.
why Simcoe turned it down.
Yeah.
One thing that could be like I think it was 12 members of the council that ran the colony, the
Mm.
province, were slave owners.
Mm.
So they didn't want a black enclave somewhere in the province
Yeah.
where people could escape to because their slaves could escape to there.
Yeah.
So that could have been one of the
That could have been one
reasons.
of the
Yeah.
reasons. He did get official land patents
Hmm.
in 1804 to the land grants that he had gotten in St. Catharines in
That's right.
Grantham Township. But he sold his land.
That's right.
What
Yeah.
what what brought that on? Why didn't he? He couldn't clear it because you had to clear the land, right,
Oh no, it
to
would have
keep it.
been he had already been like even he got the land grant 1791,
Okay,
but obviously he had already lived in Niagara area
right.
since 1784
Hmm.
when they had to come across the river. So he was living somewhere already and farming. And so the same with this, and I think it was just money issues.
Well, he sold it, and I think he sold it to Robert Hamilton, a
Yeah,
very, well-known settler at the time from England, and then he continued as a laborer after
yeah,
that time.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and just found a record when Hamilton died. I think it was 1809. There's
Mm.
a list of debtors for Hamilton, and
Mm.
Richard Pierpoint's name on there.
Oh.
He owed him 14 pounds, which in those days was quite a lot of money.
Mhm.
So that's why, yeah, he was probably working for Hamilton, well, working wherever he could to make some money.
Yeah.
And he got a property in Louth Township. He's traded the other one in Louth Township.
Okay.
And again, that property in Louth, we don't know how he lost possession of that because the land records don't ever show him selling it.
Hmm. Well, this is interesting. We don't have much time, but you've been digging into this story for about 25 years, and
That's
every
right.
year you come up with something new. Um, and we'll get there in a moment. Now we come to the War of 1812, which is
Right.
really the theme that we're exploring here. And he wanted to fight on the
That's
side,
right.
and he was 68 years old.
That's
He
right.
didn't have to fight,
No,
right?
no.
But he wanted to. Now, this is probably one of the most well known. If anybody knows anything about Richard Pierpoint, they know about the whatever it is, the historic moments, those
That's
little
right.
vignettes,
Yeah.
and we see an actor playing Richard Pierpoint, and he goes in to see a British officer. We presume it's Brock,
Yeah.
and he says something to the effect of, "I was born a free man, and I want to continue, and I want to fight for my freedom."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you can pick up the story there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know, yeah, Pierpoint had made some sort of action to form an all black
Mhm.
unit in the Niagara area. And, people say, oh, he was turned down, but obviously he wasn't turned down because it was actually formed. And of course, they thought, well, he wouldn't he form it then? Of course not. He's a black man. He can't be an officer.
Well, this is maybe you, in all your digging, have found out why. So I've heard different versions of
Yeah.
this story. One is that Brock turned it down, but then Brock realized he needed more fighting men.
Yeah.
And so he went to uh, a fellow by the name of Runchi, who was a tavern owner,
Yes,
and appointed him the head of the Colored Corps.
that's right.
What do we know about
Well,
this? Yeah,
Runchi was part of the Lincoln
the
militia.
Lincoln Militia.
He was an officer in the Lincoln militia and not very well liked
Mm.
by quite a few of the members of the Lincoln militia. So some people, one of them wrote that he was the black sheep of the outfit, and so we always think that they probably just gave it to Runchi to get him out of the way of
Get
the
him out
link.
of the main regular forces or
Yeah,
main militia.
yeah,
Yeah,
because Runchi never
yeah,
led them into
yeah.
any battle, and Runchi stopped being head of it very soon after, um, in the fall already of 1812.
Hmm. So, formed as a colored corps and participated in a number of
That's
battles.
right.
The Battle of Queenston Heights, and we do have an eyewitness testimony
That's right.
from James Crooks about that. He participated in the siege of Fort Erie, or in May of 1813, the Americans came
Right.
over and retreated with Vincent to Burlington Bay, and I believe Lundy's Lane as well.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
one mention of one of the members of Colored Corps being at uh, Lundy's Lane.
Mhm.
Some historians discard that, but again, I don't think an old soldier forgets where he fought. That's kind of that becomes part of their life.
Now, in the latter stages of the war, he was he did more direct labor or garrison duty,
Yes,
and today you can go and see what they built, Fort Mississauga,
that's right.
which is just beside the golf course here in
Yeah,
Niagara on the
they
Lake.
were
Yeah,
yeah, became basically a construction unit,
unit.
and there was the head of the artificers corps. He was from, I don't know, I think he may have been French, but he thought it funny that these corps, these construction groups were usually made out of a black man. He could never
Hmm.
understand why that was the case. But of course, I think they got the more dangerous and dirty jobs, which reflected their role
Well,
in
they
society.
were they being shot at the time when they were building that thing? It was in
Well, I
1814, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
I think the Americans were still in Fort Niagara at that time. So they were in view of Fort Niagara.
mhm.
Eventually, the British took over Fort Niagara, and
That was in December of 1813.
yeah, and
So
then
maybe before that, if they
yeah,
had started.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
they because Peter Lee, one of the members of the Color Corps, was severely injured
Hmm.
at Fort Niagara. That's why we know
Mm.
they were working there as well.
All right.
Yeah,
After December. Okay, and then the war ends,
right.
1815, and he's no longer a young man.
Yeah,
And this is what's so remarkable about his story. I mean, uh, he then, I think he stays in Niagara, doesn't he?
yeah,
And works in Niagara? Yeah,
we get, and we don't know where he lived, but there's a hint because in 1828 he has a his will written for him,
right.
and that's I think that record shows him in Niagara.
Hmm.
Um, but then he leaves all his property to a man named Lemuel Brown. Now,
Correct.
Lemuel Brown's property is in Grantham Township.
Oh, wow.
In 1828, there's the census record for Lemuel Brown's family shows there's uh, like eight, I think there are at least 8 people living in the house, which I
Mm.
imagine is maybe
In
not much more
somewhere in
in
Grantham?
Grantham.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the house probably wasn't much more than a log cabin,
Mm.
but there was a number, I think four males over the age of 16 in the household. Now,
Mm.
Lemuel Brown wasn't old enough
Yeah.
to have children that old. He would have only been about 28 or 30 years old.
Now,
So
y-
I think it may have been Pierpoint might have been one of the
yeah.
males living there since he left all his property to
To
Lemuel
him.
Brown in the will.
But a little few things happened before
That's
that.
right.
So in 1821, and this is how we know what we know about him in the main,
Yeah,
he petitioned the lieutenant governor at the time, Maitland,
that's right.
and basically he said, "I want to go home."
Right.
And therein is his testimony, because we have a copy of that petition. And that in that he says, I was born in Senegal. I was taken at 16. I am old. I am without
That's right.
property. I want to go home and I want to retire.
Yeah,
He's over 70.
that's right.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
what happened was about the militiamen were supposed to get 6 months' pay
Mhm.
after the war, and the
Yeah.
government had no money to pay them. So eventually, in 1820, the word came out that they were going to get land grants.
Mhm.
And that's why, of course, Pierpoint at that age, he didn't want a another land grant.
Correct, because
And
he would have to work it.
that's
Yeah,
right. And
yeah,
they called it was in the wastelands of the
yeah,
crown.
yeah.
So it was very far out. Yeah, and an old man. He wanted to
Mm,
go back home,
mm.
which again is amazing. And he said, if they could afford, pay for him to get to England and then to the coast of Africa. And he said either at the mouth of the Senegal or Gambia rivers. And then he
Wow.
then he would find his way back
And he
home
would find his
himself.
way back home after whatever,
But he
50
still,
years,
yeah,
60 years.
and
Yeah,
he
yeah,
knew,
yeah.
which rivers to take him back home.
Wow.
So he knew where he came from. And
So, needless to say, that as well was denied,
that's
that
right.
petition, but he did get land.
That's right.
And as you say, and I'm probably not saying it well, Gara Fraxa,
Yeah, Garifrax. And
which is, for those
it's
of
just
us who don't know.
it's just on the west side or the east side of Fergus, Ontario, which is about 12 miles, about 20 kilometers north of Guelph.
Mhm.
And yeah, and it was his property. The Grand River runs right through it. Very picturesque property. And so he got it in the location ticket in 1822,
Correct.
and then 1825, the settlement duties were done, where you had to clear 5 acres.
And he did that, didn't he?
Yeah, clear half the road on one side of the property,
Build a
which
cabin.
had to be 16 by 20 feet.
Yeah.
So that was all done. And again, because of his age, he couldn't
Good.
have done it alone. And that's why we figured on his property, again, he had
Yeah.
100 acres.
Yeah.
Other people easily could have lived with him and would
Yeah.
have had to.
So we think he got help, but we're not sure
Well,
because the other members of
yeah,
the Colored Corps
yeah,
didn't take the land grants in
no,
Garifraxa.
no. John Van Patten, who was actually
Yeah.
his father had been a slave of Joseph Brant,
Hmm.
got a land grant just on the other side of the river from
But
Pierpoint.
he didn't work it, did he?
No, well, he did all the settlement duties.
Oh,
By
okay.
1823, he had done all that and sold it
Yeah.
because he worked back down around Burlington Bay, we think, for the
Right.
Secord family.
Yeah.
So he didn't need the property. And same as the other ones who got it. They didn't necessarily want to move all the way up there because there was nothing up there.
Right. And then in 1828, just to finish off,
Mm,
he made out his will. I think you alluded to it. He died somewhere around September 1838. And the most remarkable thing was he died at the age of 93,
that's right.
never got to see his homeland
Yeah.
again, but had enough energy, number one, to fight in the War of 1812, to fight for Butler's Rangers, and to clear his land, even if he had help.
Oh yeah.
It's quite
Yeah.
remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah. And and the amazing thing to me is that we we even know anything about him because at the end of his life, like in his will, he says
Mm.
he has no heirs nor relations, which didn't mean doesn't mean he didn't have a family because there are at least two records where there's a record of him with a woman.
With a woman at Fort Niagara or
Well, one
something.
at Fort
Yeah.
Niagara and one
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
in Grantham.
But we don't know.
No, we don't know the relationship. And again, so we don't know if he had children because the other amazing thing, he never showed up in a census record.
Well, is that because black people would have been omitted in census, or is it just
No,
lost records or something?
and it could be that as a black person, and it depends on the census taker
Mm.
whether he finds someone at home or if
All
someone
right.
because if no one's home, he might not even
Well,
bother
well,
asking
now
the
you have
neighbors.
to.
Yeah,
It's different.
and
Yeah.
some black people didn't want their name to be in a record
Yes.
because people could be slave catchers could be looking
Yeah.
for you. So
Yeah.
you didn't want someone to know exactly, oh, he's in Grantham Township
Well,
on this line.
because, and this is what happened to Chloe Cooley,
Cooley, yeah,
right, who was captured and taken back
that's right.
until the law was changed. And
Yeah,
that was in 18, like you could escape and live in Upper Canada,
yeah,
right?
1793. If you
Right,
came into the province, you would be
correct.
free. But if you're already enslaved here,
Enslaved.
you're still enslaved.
That's right.
Yeah,
And under that rule, Clara Cooley, or Chloe
Chloe
Cooley,
Cooley, yeah,
right, you could be taken back.
yeah,
Well, it's a remarkable story. We've gone over it really very, very quickly,
right.
because I think our listeners and our viewers want to know what a compelling story, and how did you get onto it?
Well, it happened. I was born and raised in Fergus,
Yeah.
and the house I grew up in, my parents built in West Garifraxa Township.
Hmm.
And so when Fergus was 150 years old in 1983,
Hmm.
they did a two-volume history, and there was about a page and a quarter about something called the Pierpoint settlement,
Hmm.
about black settlers being there before the Scottish came in 1833.
Hmm.
So this
So
intrigued,
these folks were our
uh,
real pioneers, at
yeah,
least in that
yeah.
area.
So
Yeah.
this intrigued me.
Yeah.
So it was, and then I figured they'd do some sort of historical memorial to him
Hmm.
eventually, and that didn't happen. So in 1994, I decided to do a small project with my family through the Ontario Heritage Foundation to put a plaque up for Pierpoint.
Hmm.
And that started the research.
Now you've written a book, and any writer that comes on the show gets to plug their
Yeah.
book. So maybe you could just show it.
So
Uh,
my brother David and I kept the research going.
right,
And so this book was published, A Soul in Life,
right.
by Dunderd Press. It's out of print now. So
But you're updating.
yeah, my
Yeah.
brother David and I have an updated book that we're going to try to get published now.
Okay.
But what the interesting thing to me is like when we first heard about Pierpoint, I had no idea where his property was. We knew it was around Fergus somewhere.
Hmm.
And when for the Heritage Foundation matching grant, you had to do the research.
Hmm.
His property was across the road from our house.
Oh, gee.
The school we went to is in the middle of his property.
Wow.
So we fished and swam and played in the mud on his property our whole childhood
Oh,
and never knew
wow.
anything
I never
about him.
knew it. I never knew it. Well, this is an incredible story, but it's not the only story. Do you want to mention some of the other folks, that were members of the Color Corps and that
Sure.
you're doing research on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, there's a number, like there are 13 members of the York militia from Toronto
Hmm.
left the York militia to join the Colored Corps. So a lot of them are there. There's one of the men, he wrote in his will,
Hmm.
and he acknowledged that it could mean death for him. But again, freedom was worth more.
You mean in coming to Canada, or?
No, from Toronto to join the fight against the Americans
Oh,
in the War
because
of
if he was
1812,
captured, obviously, right?
or
Yeah.
in the battles, yeah.
Yeah.
But he
Yeah.
died. His name was Jackson. He was actually owned a house in Toronto,
Oh, well.
and but he died of disease because a lot of them died of disease. The other person we know of is Peter Lee,
Peter Lee. Okay.
and again, he was injured so badly from the War of 1812 at Fort Niagara that he finally died 2 years after
Hmm.
um, from his injuries from the war.
Now, there are some other names that I found in doing my research: George Martin and Robert Jupiter.
Yeah, George Martin was an part of the enslaved family of John Butler.
Oh,
His father was a slave of John Butler, so of course George Martin would have been enslaved as well until he got his freedom. But
and he got his freedom fighting in Butler's Rangers, or
no, no,
no?
because
Okay.
he was, I think he would have been still a boy during the American Revolution.
Okay.
And in fact, I'm not sure if it's George Martin, but his son was still a slave of John Butler when John Butler died. But instead of freeing him, he became a slave of John Butler's daughter. And
Well, until 1830, and then the law was changed or
no,
something.
George Martin actually raised money or bought his freedom
Okay.
before that happened. And the other one, Robert Jupiter,
Hmm.
I think he was a corporal in in the Colored Corps, but he had been enslaved by the service
The
family.
service family. Right.
And again, he got a land grant up in Garifraxa Township as well.
Mhm. Um, we know very little. We've alluded to some of the things we know, the muster rolls and the petition of 1821. What are some of the, let's say, things you found out in the last 25 years that you're going to incorporate in this new edition? Tell us that, because
Well,
you're discovering new things all the time.
yeah,
Yeah.
as more records come out, again, more information on the actual Colored Corps members, other Colored Corps members,
Hmm.
um, and more. My brother David's done a lot of research into the actual battles they would have been involved
Hmm.
in the War of 1812,
Hmm.
and again, also the escape routes through Pennsylvania,
Oh, wow.
where there was the jail in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, Middle
Yeah.
Sunbury, and how
Well,
and, and
although
what
we probably need a little bit more hard evidence to make
well,
sure it was him,
oh
right? But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, because
yeah,
quite often, like there's a record of 4 black people escaping through this particular valley
really, yeah,
at that time period.
hmm,
But again, they never named the black people,
yeah,
what their
that's
names
right.
are. But we know Butler's Rangers being in that area so close to it
Hmm.
that that's how Pierpoint likely ran into them
Hmm.
somewhere in that area because they were very, very close allied with
Well,
Six
as you say,
Nations
they were recruiting
all the
people
time.
all
Yeah.
the time as they went
Oh,
along,
yeah.
and they said you can gain your freedom if you
Oh,
sign up with
that's
us.
right.
That's a
Yeah, that had come
very
out.
enticing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if you can get your freedom. A- And 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 the other thing, because
Mm,
Pierpoint, again, we're fine, because the Pierpoint in the ad said he drove wagons for the Continental Army, which again was something that was needed
hmm.
by Butler's Rangers as well, someone who knew horses and things like that. So
I think one of the things you told me when we had our
yeah.
pre-conversation prior to this was that you found some ship records or slave ship records.
Yes, we
Yeah.
have. Yes, with the when we first did the first book, we found a record from a man named Timothy Fitch, who was a merchant
Mm,
in Boston.
mhm.
So he owned 2 slave ships, smaller ships.
Right.
And so the ship, the Phyllis, went twice to Senegal. And in the letter, it's very clear. He told his captain to take this Phyllis directly to Senegal and trade as much as you can at Senegal
Hmm.
and bring on young enslaved people because they
Hmm.
didn't want the average age of an enslaved person during the transatlantic slave trade was about 14 years old. So, like 16-year-old Richard Pierpoint would have been a perfect age for them
Well,
to
it's
take.
also they tended not. There was a high casualty rate
Yes,
in the
well,
transport
yeah,
across.
that's why
Yeah.
we found
Yeah.
the records for the 2 voyages of the Phyllis.
Hmm.
The first voyage took 95 people, and the second took 96. 22% of those people died on the voyage.
Wow.
So for Pierpoint to survive that, and you can just imagine this 16-year-old stuck in the hold of this ship with,
Disease.
yeah, people dying all around him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you come into Boston or New London, Connecticut for the
Hmm.
slave, and you're standing on an auction block,
Hmm.
naked,
Hmm.
being sold into you don't know what.
Yeah.
You're all of a sudden in a place where you completely different landscape,
Hmm.
food,
Hmm.
language, customs, culture. And then, yeah, and people got to realize under British chattel slavery,
Hmm.
your property,
Hmm.
you have no rights.
Yeah.
A slave owner can do whatever he wants to you.
This is a truly remarkable story. I
Yeah,
mean, it tells us so much about the past, about a period in Western society that we should really not be, what we should really be ashamed of.
yeah.
But the remarkable thing that I get out of this story is his perseverance
Oh, yeah.
and his endurance and his courage and his willingness to continue to fight for his freedom.
And
It's
also, and
yeah,
become the other interest, and to become a leader. And
yeah.
and you can see he's already fighting for black rights in those days, which is
Yes. with his
for a
petition
stat.
in
Yes,
1794, and
and
yeah,
and
yeah,
for him to have a nickname of Captain,
Captain, Captain
the,
Dick.
yeah, to have obviously
Yeah,
had status and people knew him.
yeah.
The other interesting because the black community, and this is where I heard of him too. The black community up along Georgian Bay, like in
Hmm.
Collingwood, Owen Sound, Grey County, Simcoe County,
Yes,
they knew of him.
yeah.
Like there's no written record of him up there,
But it's
no.
oral history.
And it survived
Oh,
like
wow.
150 years.
Wow. Well, Peter, we're looking forward to more developments as you continue you've been at it 25 years or
That's
more.
right.
And we're looking, when does the new edition of the book come out?
Well, we don't know. It's pretty
Yeah.
well finished, so we're going to start um, um, going to publishers to see if
And
anyone's
is it
interested.
called A Stolen Life as well,
No,
or
we'll have a different name
it'll
for it.
have a
Yeah,
different name?
yeah.
All right. And is there some way, well, we'll put it in the show notes, right? Think you have a website or your
I I don't have a website. I have a Twitter account.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, we'll get that on the show
yeah.
notes, and we want you to thank you so much for coming in and
No,
telling us this story. I mean, I think we all need to know this story. My own ancestors came, but this is long before that.
yeah.
And
Oh,
long
yeah.
before our ancestors and helped settle this country. So, thanks again for coming, and thank you everyone for. Uh, tuning in and listening, watching this episode of the Stories of 1812 podcast. Peter, I'm sure you'll come back with some more stories as your research continues. We want to thank you. We want to thank Jim Valen here of Valen Entertainment in Niagara Falls for doing all the technical work. And we will see you next time. Our website is storiesof1812.com. So long for now.